Go away, you useless wife who can't even do chores. I sat on the floor, feeling small and insulted, while my mother-in-law stared at me angrily. We don't need you. You always look sad. You're just a burden. My sister-in-law, who never helps at home, said mean things. Wait a second, Morris. Your mom and sister are being too mean. I tried to say, but before I could finish, even my husband Mauricio looked disappointed in me. My mom and sister are right. I don't need a wife who can't do chores and work. I have a young girl who helps part-time and is much better. Pack your things and leave, Mauricio said firmly. All three of them kept saying hurtful things, calling me a bad wife. I clenched my fists, feeling angry. After using me all this time, how could they be so mean? Just you wait. I'll make sure you all get what's coming to you. But I looked at the three of them and said without changing my expression, fine, I'll leave. The family that's been putting everything on me will see what happens next. My name's Eleanor. I'm 32 and a working wife. Nowadays, many women work after getting married. And I've kept working at the same company I joined after finishing college because I enjoy it. One morning, while I was getting ready for work, Mauricio asked me, "Hey Eleanor, can you handle this? Tax season is coming." And he handed me a bunch of receipts and invoices. Again, you should handle the shop's accounting. Mauricio avoided eye contact. You know I'm better at it, so please. I married Mauricio 5 years ago. He used to work at a restaurant where I'd sometimes go. After a few dates, we decided to get married. Now, Mauricio has his own cafe, but he leaves all the boring tasks like buying things and accounting to me. As I headed out the door, my mother-in-law said, "Eleanor, I want Chinese food tonight. Can you get the ingredients?" "No, you can do it when you get back. Also, Vivian and the kids are coming this weekend. Make sure you cook something they'll like," I reluctantly replied before leaving the house. When we got married, I wanted to live just with Mauricio, but he said we should live with his mom because he was worried about her being alone. So we moved to his big family house. My mother-in-law isn't good at cleaning, and the place was a mess when we moved in. She gets money from her pension but spends most of it eating out because she doesn't like cooking. Mauricio always says that housework is a woman's job, so even though I work too, I have to do all the chores for everyone in the family. On top of that, my sister-in-law, Vivian, who moved out after getting married, often comes back home with her kids. When she's here, I have even more work to do. This morning, when I heard she's coming back this weekend, I thought, oh no, not again. And then the dreaded weekend comes. I'd love to relax on my days off from work, but instead, I have to take care of Vivian's kids and cook while rushing around. Vivian drops a big news on me. "Eleanor, by the way, I'm getting divorced and moving back here with the kids next month. Just so you know." "What? Are you serious? Got a problem with that?" No, that must be hard for you. When are you moving back?" "As soon as I can." My sister-in-law is coming home with her kids. At first, I'm surprised, but then I think it might be good because Vivian used to be a housewife, so she might help with the chores. That would make my life easier. Even though we're not very close, I hope for less work and go on with my days. But I quickly realized I was wrong. Vivian, just like her mom, doesn't do anything. She spends all day watching TV and eating snacks. She doesn't work or help around the house. Her laziness with chores was one of the reasons for her divorce. Now I have to do all the chores, even making meals for her fussy kids and getting them ready for school. As time goes on, my job gets busier with a new project needing more hours and early mornings. The house gets messier and messier. Coming home to a messy house is really disappointing, but everyone keeps asking, "When's dinner?" Or saying, "You're so slow." To make things worse, Vivian and my mother-in-law start making rude comments. "Eleanor, the laundry is piling up. Just because you work doesn't mean you can be lazy. But I'm busy too." When I try to explain, Vivian interrupts, talking back to your mother-in-law. "You're so brave, Eleanor, and you've been buying all the meals. That's not good for the kids. If you're home, can't you help a little?" "What are you saying? Mauricio owns a business. You don't have to work. You're just selfish. So be a perfect wife." I couldn't believe it, and they acted like it was normal. That night, I was so mad I could burst. So I talked to Mauricio. "I'm busy with work, and neither your mom nor your sister is helping with the chores. Are you saying bad things about my mom and sister Eleanor?" Mauricio looked at me angrily. I said surprised, "No, that's not it. But I can't do all the chores alone. Could you help me a bit? I'm busy with my business. You might not get it because you have an easy job in an office, but running a business is tough. And isn't housework a wife's job? Don't expect me to help. Are you serious? Mauricio just goes to sleep, leaving me upset. But then I get an idea. I think of something good. I quickly grab my phone and order some things online before going to bed. A few days later, a bunch of new gadgets arrive. A machine that washes and dries clothes, a robot that cleans, and kitchen tools that cook by themselves. If no one's going to help me, I'll use these gadgets to make my chores easier. While the delivery guys bring in the new washer, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law arrive. You bought a new washer without asking. The old one still works. But it's old, and this will make laundry faster and easier, I argue. What's all this? A cleaning robot and cooking gadgets. Eleanor, come here. They call me to the living room, where they're sitting on the sofa, and I'm told to sit on the floor. Mauricio is there too, sitting with his mom, looking pleased. What's happening? I ask. My mother-in-law yells. What do you mean? What's happening? You spent all this money on lazy gadgets with the household money. What were you thinking? I thought it would help with chores. It's not about helping. People these days rely too much on machines, my sister-in-law adds. Exactly, Eleanor. And those are fancy items. The ones we have still work. You're just wasting money because Mauricio owns a business. She stares at me, and Mauricio agrees. But you're just making things easier for yourself. Can't you even do chores properly? I wanted to reply, look who's talking, but I stayed quiet. Finally, my mother-in-law, maybe tired of my quietness, snaps. If you can't do chores properly, you should leave. I stare at her in surprise. She stares back at me. We don't need you. Mauricio and I can manage without you. You always seem tired and unhappy. You're just a burden. My sister-in-law says like she's had enough. Hold on, Mauricio. Your mom and sister are being too mean. When I look to Mauricio for support, he looks down at me and says, they're right. I don't need a wife who can't handle chores. I look at Mauricio in shock, but he just smirks. I'm a business owner and I can spend my money however I want. I don't need a wife who spends it to make her life easier. Why would you say that? And I've been getting along with a young part-time helper. She's pretty, unlike you. Pack your things and go. Shocked by Mauricio's words, all three start criticizing me, saying I'm a bad wife. I clench my fists in anger. After using me for so long, they say this to me. Just you wait, I'll make you sorry, but I stayed calm and said, okay, I'll go. Good will be better without you, my mother-in-law said meanly, and I quietly stood up and put something on the table. Mauricio, let's get divorced. It was a form for divorce that I had prepared earlier. Tired of everything. Okay, I'll sign it, but don't regret it later. Mauricio signed the papers, and I packed my bags and moved to a temporary apartment the same day. No one said goodbye to me. I handed in the divorce papers at City Hall and rented a new place. At the same time, I accepted a promotion at work that I had been turning down because of housework, and I became a department head. I was able to move forward in my career, which I had almost given up on, and I focused more and more on my job. Happy that nobody was there to hold me back, I felt relieved about a week after leaving. My ex-mother-in-law started calling, but I was busy and didn't want to talk to someone who had called me worthless. I kept ignoring her calls. A year later, on a day when I wasn't working, she called again. Thinking it was time to sort things out, I answered, hello? Ah, Eleanor, you finally picked up. Why did you ignore me for over a year? What do you want? Well, how are you? Are you okay? I replied honestly, I'm doing great. Working hard in my own place. I got a better job and more money. I'm living well. Really? Would you think about coming back? She sounded almost desperate, and I asked, surprised, why now? We're having problems. We're running out of money. I couldn't help but smile as I said, oh? Mauricio's cafe isn't even making $11,000 in profit. Huh. And neither you nor your daughter are working. So that makes sense. Eleanor, you knew. Yes, I knew. Mauricio's cafe was only making about $800 a month in profit. I handled the money, so of course I knew. Mauricio's cafe was only making about $800 a month in profit. I handled the money, so of course I knew. Mauricio acted like a big business owner but didn't manage things properly or take care of customers. So he probably didn't know. Of course I knew. I was the one doing all the money stuff and keeping track of what we had. What? Why didn't you tell us? I didn't know you were a big manager at a company and giving so much money for us to live. Yeah, I was giving over $3,000 every month. That's how we all managed. I was adding my money to help because I knew Mauricio's shop wasn't making much. Maybe Mauricio realized he couldn't handle things without my money after I left. Please, Eleanor, come back. Oh, by the way, what happened to Mauricio's shop? Ignoring my ex-mother-in-law's request, I asked, is Mauricio's shop closing next month? Even the part-time helper left him. It's not surprising with such bad management, he can't run a business. And he's too proud to do what he needs to do. No woman would want to be with a man like that. I laughed, and my ex-mother-in-law didn't know what to say. Can we finish? I'm busy, she quickly said. Also, the house has been a mess since you left. She said the house was a mess because no one was cleaning. The house was messy. Nobody was cooking, so they had to buy meals, and they couldn't even buy a new washing machine. It would have been nice if you left those machines, ex-mother-in-law says. What are you saying? Those lazy machines? And why can't I take what I paid for? I shouldn't have said that, but I never thought the house would get like this just because nobody was doing chores, I said, getting a bit annoyed. Isn't it strange that 3 grown-ups can't handle chores? What are your daughter and Mauricio doing? She whispered. Well, Mauricio is sitting at home all day, doing nothing since he found out his shop isn't making money. He said he could spend his money however he wanted because he's a business owner. And Vivian won't work, no matter what I say. She doesn't do chores. And she even asks me for money for herself and her kids. My pension is running out. Really? Your daughter told me she didn't need me because she had you, I said coldly. My ex-mother-in-law tried to be nice again. Please, Eleanor, my pension isn't enough for us anymore. I don't want to go back to that house. Your children are quite the freeloaders, aren't they? She didn't know what to say. As I was about to end the call, she kept talking. Eleanor will change. Please come back. Let's all be happy together again. Sure, be happy with a useless wife, I interrupted, and she struggled with her words but kept begging. I'm sorry for what I said. We're family. Help us. We can't even pay the taxes for the house. We'll have to sell it. I don't have to help you, and I don't want to. Figure it out yourselves. Goodbye from your useless wife. I hung up and blocked her number, ignoring her cries. Sipping my coffee in my tidy apartment, I chuckled. 3 months later, I happened to walk past Mauricio's cafe. It was closed. Even their house was sold. According to a neighbor I met, they sold the house and moved to a small apartment nearby. They caused trouble in the neighborhood, always fighting and making a mess. People complained a lot. They could have worked hard and taken care of their home. But they didn't, which wasn't surprising. I looked at their old house and walked away. Since then, I've focused on my work. Recently, a nice colleague told me he liked me, saying, I love how you work so hard. Let's date and maybe get married. I think my next marriage isn't far off, and this time, I'm excited to find happiness.
My father, aged 52, and I, at 25, reside in my mother's ancestral house, an inheritance I received when she passed away from cancer when I was 16. I share the space with my 3-year-old Cocker Spaniel, Moxie. Recently, my father surprised me by marrying his high school sweetheart, Steph, 51, whom he had been in contact with for almost 2 years. They swiftly moved into the house a week after their small wedding, a ceremony to which I was not invited, unaware of their relationship. Steph, along with her twin stepdaughters, Lizzie and Lexi, fake names, both 20, and their 2 chihuahuas, Gucci and Herms, relocated to our home. The twins attend a nearby state college, and my father proposed that they live with us to save on expenses, to which I reluctantly agreed, thinking the spacious 7-bedroom house could accommodate all of us. However, complications arose. Firstly, Steph demanded my room, citing the need for space for her luxury items. I firmly refused, asserting my long-standing claim to the room. A compromise was reached wherein my father offered his closet space to her. Secondly, the twins had a habit of entering rooms without knocking, causing me considerable embarrassment during a work meeting when Lexi, wearing a bikini, barged into my office. Furthermore, Their untrained dogs left messes around the house, endangering Moxie, who was often harassed by them. I found her injured one day, prompting my concern for her safety. To aggravate matters, family photos, including those of my grandparents, great-grandparents, my mother's family, and myself, were repeatedly moved without my consent. In a recent incident, Steph replaced these pictures with her own, causing a heated argument between us. She insisted on setting house rules, claiming it was her domain, implying I lacked proper upbringing due to my mother's absence. I could not tolerate her disrespect in my own home. Furious, I confronted her, asserting my ownership of the house, and told her unequivocally that if she and her twins refused to respect my boundaries, they could pack their belongings and leave. I reminded her, "Lady, you are living under my roof," affirming my authority in the situation. "This house is my inheritance from my mother, and at this moment, you, your twins, and your dogs are trespassing. Get out before I call the cops." When my father returned home early that day after Steph told him what transpired, I explained my perspective. It was mentioned that they were still adjusting to the house, and the move had been challenging for them. I shared all the issues I had been facing, but my father insisted that things would improve if we gave them time. I had endured their behavior and reached my limit. I firmly stated that enough was enough. He continued to defend them, so I made a decision. I told him he could either move out with them or stay, but he had until the end of the week to make his choice. Did I do the right thing by forcing my dad to choose between me and his new family? I had given them a chance, but disrespecting my mother's memory in the house where we both grew up was my breaking point. The top comments before reading the updates were overwhelmingly supportive of my decision. "Definitely yes, good for you." Literally my first thought, nodding like yes. "Good, they sound terrible." "Girl, you did what you had to do, and I would 100% do the exact same thing. Your father, on the other hand, needs to grow some spine. It seems like she's got him wrapped around her fingers. I doubt it was even his idea to get married without inviting you. If he ends up choosing them, just cut them out, though no contact. You don't need that kind of toxicity in your life. Also, make sure he can't contest your inheritance regarding the house, just so they can stay there. You know, people these days. I hope it turns out in your favor. Don't put the secret wedding on the wife. Daddy Dearest dated for 2 years, hiding it so hard that OP had no clue whatsoever. Even if this was her idea, Daddy Dearest was totally in support of it. The amount of entitlement your father's wife and stepdaughters have is absurd. I am so glad you kicked them out. As far as your dad, his behavior is also pretty terrible. The whole thing of, whoops, I got married, didn't tell you, and oh, by the way, can my new family move in? He is not showing any courtesy, respect, and honesty. I wouldn't be surprised if the wedding was the stepmom's idea, especially not inviting the daughter of the man you're marrying. Like, what is that? Just a quick update. I've read through all your comments, and I want to express my gratitude for your support. It means a lot to me. I realize it might seem like I'm a pushover, and maybe I am. I just prefer avoiding confrontation and arguments. I'm not the type to engage in fights with someone. I'd taken your advice and decided to change the locks around the house. Unfortunately, the gate on the property is old and rusted, and it's been open for who knows how long. I can't do much about it at the moment. I've contacted the same lawyer who handled my mom's will to review if there are any loopholes or chances that my dad could contest it. I'll be meeting with her in a couple of hours. About my dad, he's a good man. He's worked hard to provide for me and my needs after my mom died. He's never asked me to tap into my money to help with living expenses, etc. He earns a decent amount as an engineer, around 6 figures. So I don't think he's after my money, but I could be wrong. I think he's just blindsided by the fact that someone still finds him attractive at his age. It didn't help that it was his high school sweetheart. I confronted him about his impromptu wedding and how he kept things from me. He said he didn't know how I would react if I knew he was dating his ex-girlfriend before he met and admired my mom. I was upset. but I eventually got over it since he seemed happy having her around. I don't know the full story between them or if there's any bad blood between her and my mom to make her act out and disrespect her. Steph and her daughters are staying somewhere in town now. Frankly, I don't care to find out where. They have the means to take care of themselves, and if they run out, they can always sell their luxury bags. They seem to have so many that they require a whole closet just to store them. For those wondering about my relatives, my mom was an only child, and my grandparents left everything to her. When my mom passed away, I inherited most of what she had, and she also left some to my dad. My grandparents on my dad's side live about 6 hours away with my uncles and cousins. So it's just me, my dad, and Moxie here. Speaking of Moxie, she's doing well. She seems happier and enjoys the quietness around the house. I'll update again as soon as I can. But once again, thank you all for your support. It sounds like I'm safe, and I appreciate your reassurance that kicking them out was the right thing to do. I've taken your suggestion to heart and will be sure to keep anything sentimental or valuable to me locked up, just in case she comes back and tries to destroy some of my pictures, etc. This is indeed a great suggestion. In addition to changing the locks, I should document and keep records of everything with monetary and sentimental value. Keeping a video record, photographs, a ledger, or a spreadsheet of my belongings is a wise move to ensure their protection. As for the size of my property, it has indeed been in the family for generations. It's filled with a lot of history and sentimental value, making it all the more important to safeguard. You're right. There's nothing wrong with being kind. But sometimes you do have to toughen up and find your strength, which is precisely what I did. I plan to keep my valuables somewhere safe until I'm absolutely certain they are out of my life. If things turn sour, I may consider renting out rooms, but I'll make sure to have a proper lease agreement in place. You made a good point about evaluating my relationship with my dad. It is perplexing that he didn't tell me about his dating and marriage plans, but had no qualms about moving them into my house. It seems that he cares more about her than me, which is disappointing. I did have a conversation with my dad about his impromptu wedding and why he kept it from me. He claimed he was unsure how I'd react if I knew he was dating his ex-girlfriend before he met and married my mom. However, it does seem like he was more concerned about upsetting me over the dating part rather than moving a secret family into my home. In truth, my dad's actions reflect that he doesn't truly care about how difficult this situation has been for me. It's as if he values his wife and her daughter's feelings more than mine. I appreciate your perspective and insights. Now, here's the second update. I spoke with my mother's previous lawyer, Amy, a fake name, about the issue on Saturday and inquired if there was a way to contest the will. Amy showed me the documents indicating that my dad and I had both signed agreements stating that we were in accord with what was left to us and that we wouldn't contest it in the future. She also advised giving them a 30-day notice to find a new place and move out to avoid legal troubles related to the inheritance issue. So, the inheritance matter has been resolved. On Saturday night, I was supposed to have dinner with just my dad, but apparently, a private discussion between a father and daughter became a family affair with Steph and the twins present. To cut short the misery, I informed them that I had consulted Amy regarding the house and other legal matters, and that they had 30 days to find a new place and move out. Steph tried to object, but I shut her down, suggesting that we all go to family therapy and take some time to get to know each other. I rolled my eyes at the mere thought. I firmly stated that it had been months since they moved in, yet they hadn't made any effort to be a family unless they needed something. I had had enough, so I asked my dad if he was going with them or staying, indicating that his decision would determine which items he could take with him. He seemed confused, asking if I was kicking him out. I clarified that I wasn't, but wherever he decided to go, he would have to manage on his own. However, I made it clear that I wouldn't maintain contact if he chose to leave. Steph asked why I was evicting him from his own house, to which I replied that I inherited the house from my mother. There seemed to be a misunderstanding on their part. particularly with Lexi, who argued that it would be difficult to move since they were in the midst of finishing the spring semester and finals were just a few weeks away. I simply smiled and suggested they find a new place swiftly. After that, I left the conversation. On Easter Sunday, I invited my boyfriend, his family, and my two best friends over to celebrate. My dad had been calling me, and my brother had been answering his calls, inviting me to spend the day with them. However, as far as I'm concerned, the only family I recognize now are my two best friends, my boyfriend and his family. It was a wonderful Sunday, filled with egg hunting, games, and a grand dinner, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Everything felt just right. Currently, I'm in the process of meticulously documenting every item in the house worth over $500. I had some people over to assist with this task. All the locks have been changed, and I've only given a copy to my boyfriend. No need to worry about my dad asking him for a key since my dad doesn't approve of him, given his middle-class background. I've also taken steps to enhance security by hiring professionals to install a security system around the house and property. Additionally, I have a meeting scheduled with someone to discuss the fences and gates. I haven't tapped into the funds my mom left behind, as I've been using them for college tuition, dorm expenses, and other needs. However, given the urgency of the situation, I believe it's time to access those funds. All the family pictures and portraits are currently in storage, and other smaller valuables are stored in a safety deposit box. Important documents are kept in a water and fireproof safe that requires both a key and a pin to open, and it's situated in my room. I'm taking every precaution and advice that you've provided in the comments on my previous post. Thank you for your valuable suggestions. So, for now, that's the update. I'm not entirely sure why my dad is choosing to be with them rather than me, his own flesh and blood. I've come to accept that, for some unknown or unexplainable reason, they are more important to him. It's challenging, as he's the only family I have left here, and I'm not particularly close to his side of the family. However, once they move out, I plan to cut contact with him. He's a grown man and can decide what he wants to do with his life. I appreciate all the support and well wishes. Thank you for your encouragement. You're doing a great job, and it's essential not to let your dad manipulate you or lie to get his way. He made his choice, and you shouldn't allow him to weasel his way back into your life. Don't be surprised if some emergency or crisis comes up in the future, as that's a common tactic some families use to regain access. Stay strong and true to your decisions. I cut ties with them 3 years ago. In the past month alone, there have been relentless attempts to drag me back into their chaos. First, there was the pressure to get tested for some unspecified issue when my grandpa needed blood due to a rare problem. Then my grandma had a minor stroke with no lasting damage, but it was blown out of proportion. My sister wanted a divorce, and my parents were unhelpful, leaving me to handle the emotional fallout alone. Now my mom is bombarding me with frantic voicemails about my sister needing support, all while my grandpa battles pneumonia or congestive heart failure. He's 19, his health is deteriorating, and I feel helpless. They paint me as a heartless monster for not caring, but every manufactured crisis has made me numb. They create emergencies, ensuring things can never get better, providing an excuse to stay in my life. I'm doing my best to document everything. You're absolutely right. These people will invent insane reasons to crawl back into my life. Mom might manipulate Dad's decisions by withholding intimacy, forcing him to choose her over me. It's sad how some people prioritize their desires over their children's well-being. I agree. It's time for me to focus my energy on my boyfriend and his family. My dad's blindness to my feelings before making major decisions is disappointing. While I'm an adult, if he's my only family, one would think he'd make wiser choices. I've seen worse situations on various platforms, like husbands leaving their wives for mistresses, so I should be able to handle this. I just hope my boyfriend isn't taking advantage of me. I should consider a prenuptial agreement to safeguard my interests. It's become apparent that she assumed my dad's house was her own, which is why she asked me to give up my room for her convenience. She underestimated my resolve. but it was a crafty move. Kudos to her. But this situation feels like a twisted version of Cinderella, where everything goes right for her, but not for the wicked stepmother and stepsisters. Boycotting contact after my dad moves his new family out seems necessary. He married her without considering my feelings, and he should have provided them with their own place from the start. Perhaps that could have salvaged our relationship. If he genuinely wanted to be a father to me, he should have stood up for me and his late wife against his new family's disrespectful behavior. Instead, he's shifting the burden onto me, and that's not how a parent should act. Let me begin by apologizing for the length of this story. When I was 15, my dad passed away. He and my mom weren't particularly close at that time, so while his death hit me hard, my mom didn't seem as affected as one might expect. I decided to join the military at the age of 17, spending my first year away from home. During my absence, my mom remarried, but I didn't really connect with my stepdad. We had different personalities, and he often made snide remarks, telling me to toughen up whenever I was upset about something. Although both of us were at fault for our disagreements, they never escalated too far. After serving for nearly 5 years, I was medically discharged. My mom and stepdad welcomed me back home, assuring me it was a happy reunion. I intended it to be brief, just until I found a job and got back on my feet. I even offered to pay rent, but they declined. However, just 3 days after returning home, my stepdad approached me about contributing to the rent. I was puzzled, but since it was his house, we agreed on an arrangement. Strangely, he never mentioned this to my mom, so I assumed he preferred to keep it between us. I never asked for assistance from them, not out of spite, but because I wanted to be independent. In contrast, my stepdad, who was only slightly older than me, had received substantial financial support from my mom and her husband. They paid for his education, his car, and his living expenses throughout college and beyond. It felt disheartening that he received all this help, while I was immediately asked to pay rent. Despite our age difference, we got along fairly well. The only issue was this disparity in support. After 3 months, I moved out and soon after met a girl I was crazy about. We started dating, and I was ecstatic throughout the relationship. However, I was apprehensive about introducing her to my mom, fearing her judgment. Surprisingly, my worries were unfounded. My mom and my girlfriend got along remarkably well. My girlfriend didn't have much of a family, and my mom and stepdad became like family to her. They bonded so well that they would hang out together, sometimes just the two of them. I was thrilled to see this connection, and my stepdad even liked her, which brought us closer together, a bond I hadn't known I wanted until then. My stepdad had overcome significant challenges in his life. His father had abandoned their family, and he managed to put himself through school, securing a high-paying job on his own. I admired his self-reliance immensely. After a year of dating, I knew I wanted to marry this girl. When I shared my feelings with my mom and stepdad, they seemed genuinely happy. She had already become an integral part of our family, practically one of us. My mom then handed me her engagement ring, a precious heirloom from my dad, which she had kept. The job I had didn't pay much, so I thought, even if it wasn't the ultimate ring, it should always have a special place. I considered it a great placeholder. When I proposed to my girlfriend with the ring, she told me it wasn't just a placeholder. She absolutely loved it. I had never been happier in my life. We started planning our wedding, and to my surprise, my mom and stepdad offered to help with the finances. It was the first time they had offered me financial assistance, and it felt surreal. Fast forward about 3 months, I received a call from my stepdad, and it felt ominous. I went over to their place after work. When I arrived, I saw my mom, stepdad, stepbrother, and my fiancé, who was sitting on the couch, clearly upset. I thought someone had died. I moved to sit next to her, but my stepdad stopped me. He accused me of cheating on her throughout our entire relationship. I was baffled and denied the accusations vehemently. I told everyone there that I never even texted other women I wasn't related to besides my fiancé. Apparently, some girl had obtained my fiancé's number and claimed that we had been having an affair for over a year. She didn't know I was in a committed relationship. She sent my fiancé screenshots of alleged conversations and details about my life that a stranger shouldn't know. I couldn't grasp what was happening. I was shocked, heartbroken, and furious. My fiancé looked at my phone, confirming I had never sent those messages. Both she and my mother were in tears, and I couldn't hold back my own. My stepdad hurled every insult he could think of at me and forcibly escorted me out of the house. He warned that if he ever saw me on his property again, he'd involve the police. In the following weeks, I tried desperately to contact them, sending calls, texts, voicemails, and messages on every available app. But there was no response. After a month of silence, my stepdad called, instructing me to stop trying to reach my fiancé. He made it clear that I was no longer welcome in their home or around their family. I attempted to call my mother during that time, but she didn't answer either. All I received was a text expressing her sadness and disappointment. My mom didn't have much family, so they usually spent holidays with my stepdad's relatives. They all ostracized me, sharing Christmas photos on Facebook where my ex-fiancé appeared happy and content, which devastated me. The only family member who stood by me was my dad's brother and his family. Even they seemed hesitant around me. The only person who truly believed my innocence was my uncle. I genuinely believe I wouldn't have made it without him. He showed me the kind of fatherly love I had been missing, and I can't express how grateful I am for him. About 6 months after the incident, I decided to move away from the East Coast and settled down in California, needing a fresh start. Less than a year after my move, I received a call from a familiar area code back home, which was rare. I hesitantly answered, and it was my stepbrother on the line. I promptly hung up, feeling a mix of emotions. He called back, and after much internal debate, I answered that night. The conversation was awkward at best. He told me my ex-fiancée had been devastated for a long time. It took her nearly a year to even consider dating again. Meanwhile, I hadn't moved on at all. A few months into her dating attempts, my stepdad encouraged my stepbrother to ask her out. Things seemed all right in the beginning, but they never really clicked. Apparently, my stepbrother confided in my stepdad about this, who, in a fit of misguided advice, told him, "I didn't get rid of my name for nothing. She's a great girl. You need to figure it out with her." I was dumbfounded, quickly replaced by anger. It turned out my stepdad had orchestrated a scheme. He got a girl I didn't know to pose as someone I had an affair with, forging message screenshots and sending them to my ex-fiancée. My stepbrother had been burdened by this information for about a month before he finally revealed the truth to me. He was planning to tell my mom and ex-fiancée the next day. I asked him to hold off on contacting me, giving me time to process everything. That was last Tuesday. I reached out to him recently, telling him I was ready to talk to them, and they could call me tomorrow. I don't know what to say, and I'm uncertain about forgiveness. So far, the only person I've confided in is my uncle, who I asked to keep this to himself. I apologize again for the length of this. My therapist happened to be on vacation, and I needed an outlet. As for the top advice before reading the updates, you're right. My stepfather is toxic, insecure, and narrow-minded. I genuinely appreciate your perspective. I've come to realize that staying no contact with them is the best decision for my well-being. While I might understand why my ex-fiancée believed the false accusations, it doesn't mean I should rebuild any kind of relationship with her. She didn't trust me or give me a chance to prove my innocence. There are plenty of other women out there who won't be easily manipulated or carry the baggage of mistrust. I'm deeply sorry for all the pain this situation has caused, but I acknowledge that my life will be happier without any of them in it. I can see that this is a lot for you to digest, and I'm relieved that the truth has finally come to light. You have every right to take your time in deciding whether you want to rebuild the relationships that were damaged. It's important to remember that you have the option to do what's best for you. I strongly recommend starting therapy as well, as it can be a valuable resource for processing everything you've been through. We would love to hear from you again and support you as you navigate this challenging situation. As for the first update, I apologize for the delay. It's completely understandable given the circumstances. Your stepbrother reached out to you this morning and provided more details about what happened. Apparently, what your stepfather had initially told you wasn't the whole truth. He was careful with his words, seemingly to avoid directly implicating himself, but heavily implying his actions. It's worth noting that your stepbrother is quite astute. He didn't rush to confront your mother and fiancé in a shouting match with his dad. Instead, he took a more thoughtful approach that you might not have considered. He managed to track down a girl who had been in contact with your stepfather, presumably through Tinder. This discovery strongly suggests that your stepfather had been involved in extramarital affairs, which understandably angered you for obvious reasons. The girl admitted that she didn't sleep with your stepfather, but the truth or falsehood of that statement didn't hold much significance for you. What mattered was that your stepbrother talked to her, sharing the story and convincing her to cooperate. It appears that she was well aware of her actions, and the revelation of what happened to you seemed to affect her profoundly. Regardless of her motives, her willingness to cooperate was what counted. She was compensated with $1,000 for making a phone call, and she was given instructions on what to say and provided pictures as evidence. Your stepbrother also offered to pay her again, for the record. She agreed to do it without charge, and it happened just yesterday. My stepfather is away on a business trip until Wednesday, so it was just the four of them there. She came in and spilled everything to my mom and ex-fiancé. My stepbrother mentioned that tears started flowing almost immediately from all three of them after he disclosed everything. He informed them that I was in California and that he would let them know when I was ready to be contacted. To provide some context, here's a bit of backstory to help you understand my mother and ex-fiancé a little better. Please note that this is not an excuse for their actions. It's merely meant to shed light on their behavior. After my dad passed away, my mother and I became incredibly close. We were each other's support system. However, when I turned 16, I started drinking to cope with my emotions. One New Year's Eve, I ended up out with my friends, leaving my mom alone at home. She texted me, expressing her sadness about being by herself. And from that moment, things were never quite the same between us. My mother has always been the type of person who needs someone around. She struggles to handle being alone. When her love for my dad started to fade, I felt the void. Later, when I grew up and moved out, my stepfather filled that void. As for my ex-fiancée, she never had much of a family and had serious trust issues due to her past relationships. Despite her difficult past, she never spoke ill of her ex-boyfriends, except for one who was physically abusive, a clear exception. Despite my own shyness, I've been told I'm cute, particularly by younger girls, although I never liked that label as it didn't feel very masculine. Eventually, I learned to appreciate my features and how easily I blushed. My fiancé, who is nearly 3 years older than me, preferred older girls. I never paid much attention to younger girls who showed interest in me, yet they continued to approach me. This attention bothered my fiancée. She would often question why I wasn't interested in these younger girls or why I didn't leave her for someone younger and more attractive. I always found her incredibly attractive, much more so than I ever saw myself, and I constantly reassured her of that. I made it clear that no other girl held any appeal for me. I hope this insight provides some context for why I think they did what they did and believed what they believed. However, this is not an excuse for their actions, and personally, I am not that understanding. At the end of the call with my brother, he mentioned that both my mom and my ex-fiancée wanted to call me today. I agreed, so I waited patiently. Around 3 p.m., I started to feel a bit puzzled. I began to wonder if my brother had made everything up just to mess with me. This thought genuinely worried me. Then, I received a text from him, asking if I was all right. I replied yes and inquired if they were actually planning on calling. He informed me they had been trying for the past few hours. I had blocked both of them when I moved out west, but somehow I had forgotten to block him. I felt grateful that I hadn't, though. I blocked their calls and about 10 minutes later, I received a call from my mom. The first thing she said was that I sounded different. I almost hung up right then. It took all I had to just respond with a quiet yeah. She immediately broke down, and I thought I'd feel something more, but the pain of it all just overwhelmed me. She asked if I had received her texts, and I said no. I guess she had been trying to text me over the last year, but I had her number blocked. If she truly wanted to reach me, she could have found a way. It might sound harsh, but I know it's true. I told her I would be willing to rebuild some semblance of a relationship with time, and she seemed content with that. She also informed me that she was removing all her belongings from the house before my stepfather returned, and that she would be filing for divorce immediately. I believed her. She might be a poor excuse for a mother in my eyes, but she's never been someone to take half measures. I really wish I could be there to witness that man's face when he comes back to an empty home. Next, my ex-fiancé got on the phone and offered tearful apologies, much like my mom did. I felt something more talking to her. I tried to get her to remember how many times I assured her I would never betray her and how much I loved her. She was beside herself, and honestly, I'm glad we talked. We had about half an hour of conversation, and I even allowed myself to entertain the thought, despite telling myself for over a year that it would never happen, that there could still be something between us. She mentioned she still had the engagement ring, which upset me deeply. I told her to give it to my mom because it no longer belonged to either of us. I could tell this crushed her, and I'll admit, selfishly, I wanted it to. She asked if she could call or text me. I said it's fine, but not to expect a prompt response either way. I essentially gave her the same ultimatum as my mom. I told her that the chances of us having a future relationship were very slim, which was saddening. She understood this as well. I spoke to my brother last, expressing my gratitude for everything he had done. He was helping my mom retrieve her belongings from my stepfather's house, and he apologized for all that had transpired. He informed me that he was going to disclose the entire situation to the rest of the family, with whom I have no connection and don't anticipate communicating with, except for my stepdad's mother, who happens to be the oldest person in either of our families. She had wished me a happy birthday and Merry Christmas over the last year. Perhaps she doesn't care due to her age, or maybe she felt remorse, but I intend to speak with her. I apologize for all the rambling. I'll be flying home for my uncle's 60th birthday in the first week of March. It will be my first time back since I moved out here, and I definitely plan on seeing my brother. While I'm not opposed to seeing my mom and ex-fiancé, I've made it clear to them that I have a lot of healing to do, as do they. If anything further develops, I will provide another update, perhaps after my trip home. For now, this is the last of what I have to share. I haven't been active on social media much in the last year for obvious reasons, and I haven't come across any similar stories to mine that have been referenced in the comments, but I'd appreciate any if you can find them. Thank you to everyone. In the second update, I received a call from a number back home. I had deleted most of my numbers a while ago from anyone I wasn't in touch with. I answered the call, and it was my stepfather. I immediately hung up and blocked the number. After that, I called my mom, fiancé, and brother to make sure they were safe. My mom is staying at a hotel that he doesn't know about, while my fiancé and brother are at their own residences and feel adequately protected. My stepfather has not shown any indications of being a violent man, but it's better to be safe than sorry. My brother told me that he had received a call from him this morning, but he refused to answer. He just informed him about the situation and told him not to contact any of them. I'm not sure how long my stepfather sat there, but he called me around 3 p.m. Pacific time. About an hour ago, I received a message from a different number saying, "We need to talk." I assume it's him, and I haven't responded. That's the latest. In the third update, my stepdad's mother called me. I had her number saved due to the reasons I mentioned earlier. I was a bit concerned that it might have been him trying to gather information, but it wasn't. She's a very kind lady who didn't have to be nice to me in any way, but she showed me compassion. She was very pleasant and wished me well, while also apologizing on behalf of the family. I thanked her and wished her the best as well. It was surprising that